to join us. My name is Meg Fensel, and we have a number of other Sustain Charlotte staff working behind the scenes. We have Tariq Kiley, Eric Zaverl, and Alina Shepard, who will be co-hosting and supporting this meeting. And today we're really excited to invite you to join us in observing Transit Equity Day as we call for more investment in equitable transit service and announce the release of a new report. Transit Equity Day is celebrated annually on Rosa Parks' birthday by cities across the country, as together we call for the recognition of transit equity as a civil right and a strategy to combat climate change. So I'd first like to talk about just some basic logistics of the event. If you are with the press and you have a question, you can enter that into the chat box. Everyone should be able to see the chat, and we will ask those of our speakers at the end. We will also be posting a recording of this press conference to sustaincharlotte.org/Transit Equity Day 2022, which Eric has put in the chat. So just as soon as we can get that processed on Zoom, we'll post that, as well as the final version of the report. So I will go through the speaker lineup and let you know what's happening. First, we'll have Sustain Charlotte's founder and executive director, Shannon Binns, followed by two Charlotte residents who will speak about what equitable transit means to them, Reverend Garner-Mullins and Brian Williams, followed by Charlotte Mayor Pro Tem and Chair of the Transportation and Planning Committee, Julie Eiselt, and Charlotte Mayor Vi Lyles. And we will wrap up with the question and answer period for our press. And we also have Elizabeth Bunn joining us. Elizabeth is the policy director for the Labor Network for Sustainability. And she's one of the people who helped to prepare the report that we're co-releasing today. So Elizabeth is available to answer reporters' questions about the report. And Eric will also put Elizabeth's email address in the chat. So now it's my pleasure to introduce Sustain Charlotte founder and executive director, Shannon Binns.
Good morning. Thanks for being here. A new report released today by Alliance for a Just Society, the Labor Network for Sustainability, and Transit Center shows how inadequate investments in public transit operators and maintenance employees have resulted in reduced public transit service in communities across the nation, including ours. Inadequate investments in job quality, the aging of the transit workforce, and the effects of the pandemic have reduced the transit workforce and left public transit systems unable to meet the needs of the communities they serve. Locally, these inadequate investments have led to cuts in CAT service, leaving many of our neighbors and frontline workers unable to easily get to where they need to go. The report highlights that these transit cuts fall most heavily on working people and people of color in particular. The simple truth is that many of us rely on public transit every day to get to work, school, the grocery store, or wherever it is we need to go. And if our teachers, nurses, grocery store clerks, and other frontline workers can't get where they need to be, that's a problem for all of us. Robust public transit is also a critical strategy to combating climate change. Due to our heavy reliance on cars and trucks, transportation is the largest source of climate pollution nationally and locally, comprising 40% of our greenhouse gas emissions in Charlotte. The more people who use public transit instead of driving, the less harm we do to the climate, and thereby future generations. In short, we have to invest in robust public transit, including our public transit workforce, if we want to build an economically resilient, environmentally sustainable, and racially equitable city, county, and region. That is why we need our local and state leaders to immediately invest in our transit workforce and our transit infrastructure. Federal dollars are available from the bipartisan infrastructure bill to address this growing crisis, and we must pursue those. The window of opportunity is short, and the competition from other cities with plans to improve their transit service is strong. In addition, we must secure a larger source of local transit funding, as most of these federal dollars require a local match. That is why we at Sustain Charlotte support the 1 cent for mobility countywide sales tax and call on our local and state elected officials, businesses, and nonprofits to join us with their support. Thank you.
Thank you, Shannon. I would now like to introduce Reverend Janet Garner-Mullins, who will speak on the importance of transit equity.
Good morning to everyone, and thank you. Rosa Parks, whose birthday is today, would have been 109 years old, was an iconic figure among many of the civil rights era who chose the tactic of refusing to give up her seat on the bus to a white passenger and to protest against the unequal access of African Americans to public transit. It's been said that there is no real true meaning of transit equity exactly, but the general concept is looking at how to design transportation systems that are fair. This can be thought of as how transportation has advantages and disadvantages occur relatively to different populations. Transportation advantages such as ease of access to downtown bus service, how frequent and affordable is the service, and who is considered to have those advantages. Is it only the rich? Is it only the white person or the Black person? In terms of transportation challenges, it is an understanding who is suffering from pollution, lack of access, safety issues, and the ability to have transit that is not congested. Public transportation provides affordable and convenient connections to families, jobs, housing, goods and services, medical care, and other essentials of life. And there has been a wide and remains a widespread racism, discrimination to jobs, services, and marginalization by segregation. In addition to the inequity of transportation, transit planning has limited the reach of some individuals, Black and brown, and has created wide gaps in transit access, preventing transit ability to serve as a stair step to opportunity. When we talk about transportation planning, it's rarely thought of in terms of social justice. Some analysis and studies are done, but after the fact. What would be more advantageous would be to start the planning process with clear ideas of where the inequities exist currently and what are we going to do to remedy those inequities. Some people live in transport poverty, which means when being poor and being Black and brown intersects with what is called transportation disadvantages, meaning the lack of reliable and frequent transportation. Services are too expensive or a lack of access, which excludes people. In every region, in every city, people of color are more likely to travel by public transportation than anyone else, and in other races. And so they need equitable transportation. As has been said, public transportation is a civil right. Thank you for the privilege of your time.
Thank you so much, Reverend Garner-Mullins, and thank you so much for your service on the Charlotte Regional Transportation Coalition. You are such an amazing leader in your community. I would now like to introduce, thank you, ma'am. I would now like to introduce Brian Williams. Brian is actually riding the bus to work right now, and he is very passionate about improving transit service as a new Charlotte resident.
Yes, hello, everyone. I don't know if y'all can hear me clearly. Okay, well, my name is Brian Williams. I'm a New Yorker. I came down here to get away from everything up there, the snow mainly. And I love the city. And I recently was lost my job due to COVID and was evicted. So I had to take a bunch of buses to different places to try to figure out what I'm going to do. And then that's when I realized some lines don't run to past 10 o'clock. Some lines don't run past 11 o'clock. And only the main vein lines run till 12 or 1 o'clock. But the crosstown buses do not run at all on Sundays. Very less on Saturdays. And it's really hard for people like myself who work in the mall to get around. Before I got the job, I had to figure out which shelters I was going to get to. Now, if the bus driver takes off and I can't get on the bus, I can't get to the shelter. So by the time I do get to the shelter, now I have to stay in the street because I'm past the people in. But now that I have a job and trying to get to work on time, there's so many buses like this, the 51, this the 70, when they say there's no drivers. And I can't understand that because where I'm from, you can pass the MTA test and it takes 3 to 5 years before they call you. That's how long the waiting list is. It's a city job. Great benefits, great everything. And I can't see how they don't want to come to work. They have everything in their power. But calling out at the last minute sends cats to a frenzy to try to get people on those lines. And of course, which line suffers? All the crosstown lines. So now you got to figure out how to get to the next spot. You may have to walk 10, 15 blocks to get to a main vein bus, like the 16 or the 19 or the 17, to try to transfer somewhere else. I don't think it's fair to myself. And it just really aggravated me. So Ms. Mayor, I really apologize for calling your office every other day, but no, it had to be done. And this is ridiculous, but that's all I have to say. Thank you so much.
Brian, thank you so much for sharing your story and for your tenacity and continuing to advocate for better transit service. It's speaking up and asking and demanding better service that is going to make a difference. Thank you so much. I would now like to introduce Mayor Pro Tem Julie Eiselt, who also chairs the Charlotte City Council Transportation and Planning Committee.
Thank you, Meg, and good morning, everyone. I'm happy to be following the Reverend and Mr. Williams because their points about equity in transportation are so important, especially on Transit Equity Day, but every day, because we don't talk about the cost of not having a good transportation system. We only talk about the cost of investing in it, but as Mr. Williams shows us, people are losing out on work hours, they're losing out on jobs if you don't have a bus system that is efficient and predictable. So our bus system provides mobility and connectivity. It encourages social inclusivity in terms of people being able to have access to neighborhoods that have opportunities, shopping, education, healthcare, and entertainment, but it has to be efficient. In Charlotte, we're still a very car-centric city. 3 out of 4 people commute to work by driving alone in their cars, and that's not economically or environmentally friendly. And it's not sustainable with the growth that we're having in this city. Everybody knows what it's like to sit in traffic in Charlotte. And it's not going to get any better unless we make some investments in our bus system that is going to encourage people to get out of their car and ride a more efficient and easier form of transportation. As I said, a strong bus system gives us access to, gives people access to work opportunities, and it also broadens the geography for what we consider to be affordable housing. That's a problem that we talk a lot about in Charlotte, what's affordable in terms of housing. But if you have a bus rapid transit line that can get you from Mint Hill to Charlotte in 30 minutes, 20 minutes, and you could actually sit on the bus and read a book or enjoy yourself, that's, that redefines what we consider to be areas of opportunity for affordable housing. The other point is that CATS is beginning to transition to battery electric bus fleet. And we have a tremendous opportunity to be a national leader in addressing climate change through our transportation investments. Because as Shannon said, 40% of emissions comes from transportation. While it'll take a while to get there, even if electric bus or hybrid buses is still more efficient than everybody being in their cars. So, and as the Reverend said, we talk about equity and who's being most impacted by things like pollution and lack of access to public transportation. And we know that the west side of Charlotte, areas that are near highways have disproportionately suffered because of the effects of air pollution caused by vehicle traffic. So it's very important that we consider making an investment in our public transportation infrastructure now. The cost of owning a car in North Carolina on average is $7,000 a year. We spend on average in the Charlotte region 22% of income on transportation, whereas the national best practice should be about 15%. So we spend way more than we should on transportation in our area, whereas we talk a lot about affordable housing again, and in Charlotte, it's 29% of our income goes to affordable housing. So we're just about on track, even though housing feels very expensive here. But owning a car can become a choice if we have a robust transportation system, and that can lead to better quality of life for everybody, and including older adults who would love to remain in their houses in cities like New York, Chicago. They see that because you could downsize, stay in your house, but be able to access public transportation when you can no longer drive. And that's an important feature of why we need a good public transportation bus system as well. Again, it needs to be fast, reliable, frequent, and it needs to be connected by sidewalks and bus stops so that people can, like Mr. Williams, if you're waiting for a longer amount of time, or it's raining, you have a protected area that you can be. So I would say that to everybody listening to this, please help us be advocates for investment in not just our bus system, but our public transportation system. As you all know, because I think everybody on this call is engaged in this topic, we are seeking to have a 1 cent for mobility sales tax to provide for the necessary local funding to build out our transformational mobility network and to secure the federal funding that could very well come our way. So with that, I'm going to close, but I would just want to say that we can't miss this opportunity. This window will close, this opportunity to access that funding, and only if we all come together and advocate for this is that going to work. So, and let's start with our bus system, especially today on the anniversary of the birthday of Miss Parks. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Eiselt, and thank you for your ongoing leadership in advocating for a better bus system. I was encouraged at the last Metropolitan Transit Commission meeting, which is the governing body of CATS, when there was a presentation about extending one of the bus routes down in Southwest Charlotte or Southeast Charlotte, and the mayor asked about the connectivity for pedestrians to be able to access between the two bus routes in that area. So we definitely need that coordination between the transit system and the street network that allows people riding the bus to safely reach it with crosswalks and sidewalks and bike lanes. And now it's my pleasure to introduce Charlotte Mayor Vi Lyles.
Thank you, Meg, and thank you for all of the speakers that have talked about this. There's probably not a lot left for me to point out, but I want to do a few key points. First, I want to thank our transit system team. It is a tough job right now, Brian. We are going through a lot of changes that's impacted across the workforce and workplace altogether. And I remember the first time we had an African-American woman driving a bus when she was hired. But now with childcare and issues that we have with COVID. So let's give everybody some grace today and thank transit drivers and the team that's doing this to provide us the service every day. I want to start off with the idea that when this city council was elected, most of us have been on for at least 2 terms. We talked about quality of life, and we started out with affordable housing, and we doubled the amount of investment that we were making in affordable housing. We've now got over 4,000 units underway for affordability. And that's not the end of it, but you know what I like to think about is over the last 4 years, the community has embraced affordable housing. Then we introduced the idea of new and better jobs, and we actively went after places that we thought would require people to provide a livable wage, meaning that people could have choices of what price point, but they could also look at this and they could say, if I take this job, I can choose how I want to live, where I want to live, and the lifestyle that I want to have. And we've done over 15,000 jobs in these 4 years that are new to this community. And a lot of them are jobs that I call working jobs that allow you to live in this city and community. But I think that when we got to this point in time, we began to see the need to connect jobs with housing. And what does that require? It requires an investment in transportation and connectivity and all modes of it. I want to thank Harvey Gantt for leading the Charlotte Moves Task Force and giving us a blueprint that begins to talk about what we need to do. And that includes the ability to walk, bike, as well as take mass transit, and even drive where we can have better and opportunities to reduce congestion. And that task force came and helped us really understand that we have to connect And a lot of credit goes to the Mayor Pro Tem, Julie Eiselt, and a number of people across this region, because we are now not just talking about what's local, we're talking about what's regional. And we're talking about what it will take for Mecklenburg, Cabarrus, Gaston to all come together so we can share in the economic success that we're having, the growth that we're having with really great people in our community. So now where are we? We're at this time on a day that Rosa Parks led a boycott in Montgomery for a community to come together for change. It is now for us to take a more positive perspective and look at this mobility sales tax increase. 1 cent across a county, then across our region, can actually result in something that is transformational. And that's why we call it transformational. It's about making a big difference. What is that saying? You make no small plans, make plans with hope and results. That's what we're trying to do with our mobility network. When you look at the things that we've committed to do in quality of life, we talk about greenways, we talk about sidewalks, we're talking about a efficient, clean, and flexible and on-time bus system. We're talking about the 2 rail lines that are required to connect this to our region. And then finally, I think what we're talking about is making this a place where people choose to live. Brian, I promise you, if we can get this 1 cent sales tax on the ballot and you will support it, then that will make all the difference in the world for us in the next 5 to 10 years. What we're doing today is not talking about what will happen tomorrow. You know that change comes, but Charlotte has always embraced change. And once we got a plan, Charlotte has always acted on it. And I'm looking forward to the day that we actually have before the voters the sales tax referendum. And when it passes, that we actually begin to see the next generation have the connectivity for quality of life, housing, jobs, and the ability to move around the city in a way that keeps our city clean and healthy. I believe in this. I just hope that we can get a message out that everyone can understand how important this is. Charlotte, when I came here, was about 125,000 people. We're almost 900,000 people today. So what do we do? What is our responsibility? For all of us that came before and voted for all of those big plans, they may not have been exactly equitable. They may not have done what we needed for Black and brown people, but today we can do that. So thank you for the opportunity to talk about what we can be for the next generation if we pass the 1 cent sales tax for mobility.
Thank you, Mayor Lyles. I love that quote, make no small plans. It's time for big plans here in the Charlotte-Mecklenburg area. I'll now turn it over to Eric Zaverl. Eric has been monitoring the chat and he will ask some questions of our speakers and we will let them go at 9:30. And then if any additional questions remain unanswered, the Sustain Charlotte staff can stay on a bit longer.
Good morning, Meg. Good morning, everyone, and thank you, Meg. If I miss any questions, my colleagues, please let me know why I'm reading them. But the first question is from Herb. Is there enough political and social will in the region to expand transit options where counties around Mecklenburg County may be less important or not a high priority for the surrounding counties?
I'll start with that. Julie has both a regional and a state perspective as well, but I'm going to start with the local perspective. When we started out with our bus system going to what we call the metropolitan transportation, when we had the quarter-cent sales tax, it was all about the 7 towns in Mecklenburg County and the county representative. Today, when you come to these meetings, you can see that we have the mayors from Stallings, Indian Trail, we have the mayors from Gastonia, Cabarrus, or Concord, because people recognize this growth. Charlotte is in the middle, but growth is occurring all around us. The towns of Huntersville, Cornelius, and Davison are growing at the same rapid rate that Charlotte is. So I believe that there is buy-in and understanding. The question is, how do you fund it? I don't think anyone in this region questions the need, Herb. I think what they question is, what is the best way to get it done? And what are the priorities for getting it done? So yes, I do believe that there's understanding and buy-in that growth is taking place, that there's need for Mecklenburg County to do something so that the region continues to grow. As mayor, I always say, if we can have success in Anson County, then Charlotte would have been exceptionally successful. Julie?
Yeah, to tag on to what the mayor is saying, if you go out into these counties and the towns around Charlotte and you talk to them, they're dependent upon this region for jobs. And so like in Kannapolis, the Kannapolis-Rowan County Community College, if I have that name exactly right, they've got an incredible biomed program in the community college, but the students need internships, right? And those internships are here. And so they run a sprinter bus to the Blue Line in order for the students to get in to take job opportunities and internship opportunities. So the region, I've had rural colleagues, city council members, town council members say to me, you've got to get this done, because they are dependent upon the economic engine that is the Charlotte region, not just Charlotte, but Mint Hill or Gastonia, this whole region that is producing jobs, and people have to have access, not just to jobs, but to education. And again, like we said before, to affordable places to live.
Thank you. And I would have started with this question if it came in first, but where does the 1 cent for mobility stand right now, or the latest news on it?
So let me use the word negotiation. As I said before, we stand with, first you have to understand and define the issue. You have to define the solutions, and then you have to find a way to pay for it. And then there are other steps that go beyond that. We have to figure out how we're actually going to do the work and the construction and the schedule. So I think we're at this point that we've reached the consensus on the need. I think the real question is how to pay for it and having an idea. So I think Mayor Pro Tem said this, that if you live in Charlotte, you're paying more for transportation if you drive a car than you would if you were on mass transit. We've got to make that case to the public. Beyond our current riders, we have to give people a reason to get out of their car. And that means changing some of the ways that we're thought. Charlotte is a car-centric built city. We were built and flourished during the time that everybody wanted to have 2 cars, one at least, and 2. But now 2 cars, that can bankrupt an affordable middle-class job. And so we've just got to get the message out there and get people to understand that if we provide efficient, clean, and safe transportation modes as an option, especially as we begin to understand what climate change is going to do to our community, I think that we can see that we'll get someplace on funding this plan.
This last question, I think we have time for. It combines what David was asking about CAT's current vacancies and their average pay with what David was kind of talking about, the challenge of trying to get the 1 cent for mobility passed when the service is lacking. And they kind of go hand in hand, having this lack of staff and then trying to get the public to endorse the 1 cent for mobility. Can you explain how those are connected and the challenge behind that?
Julie,
Go ahead.
you want to do that one?
Yeah, I think that's a really important question, and it's a drum that I've been beating, because if we don't have a transportation system now that is efficient and people trust, they're not going to ride it, no matter what we invest. And you can't ask people to pay for something that they don't trust. So I think the critical thing now is to figure out what we need to do to make experiences like for Mr. Williams more seamless, flawless, predictable, efficient. And that means fixing what's wrong with our transit system now and being honest about it, right? There's not a bus system in this country that's not struggling right now with bus service because of the pandemic and because of drivers not being there. Well, then we need to communicate that better. If a bus route isn't operating because they don't have a driver, we need to figure out the best way to get that message out there and look for other solutions. I don't know what they are right now, but we're not talking about it enough. And so that, I think that's a start to build trust, and to be able to say to folks, you can, this is going to be a system that you're going to want to ride. I think, you know, that's on us to fix right now.
Thank you. Excuse me. Thank you so much for all of our speakers joining us. Thank you, press, for attending. I know we also had a number of our advocates from the Charlotte Regional Transportation Coalition joining us as well this morning. I will be sharing all of the questions that were entered into the chat with our speakers later this morning. We will be downloading the video, and I'll share that on the sustainedcharlotte.org/Transit Equity Day 2022 page. So that will be available for everyone to view as well. So I will let our speakers go with our deepest gratitude. And if anybody would like to stay on the call, we can see what questions we might be able to answer here at this